Hey guys, my name is Jonathan Reich. I'm a licensed CPA in the state of Louisiana, but I'm not your licensed CPA, so take that with a grain of salt. Now that we've covered all of our bases, I want to get into today's topic, which is companies that buy annuities. And so this is a bit more of a niche topic, but I have some clients who have annuities. Especially, I find that's more common with elderly people or people who maybe had the good fortune of someone was a decent financial planner. I'm not saying the best financial planner because there are other investments out there with a higher ROI. But if maybe you had someone who's a little savvy and was trying to think about the future, maybe you have an annuity, maybe it's a widow or a spouse or someone like that. And so these are really good long-term financial like safety nets. But what happens when you need your money now? Oh my goodness, that almost sounds like J.G. Wentworth, which we're going to talk about today. But what happens when you need the money up front? Basically, there are companies out there that specialize in buying structured settlements, annuities, lottery winnings, stuff like that, like really, really large settlements. And so that is the topic that I want to go over with today, primarily focusing on annuities. So first, annuity, you pay a lump sum up front and then you get more than that over time due to interest and the time value of money. That's how an annuity works. Maybe I pay $100,000 for an annuity today, and then over the course of 10 years, I receive $120,000 for my patients, basically. Um, so that's why it's a good safety blanket because it's guaranteed income. So who's good to buy annuities? Well, let's talk about it. The first one I want to talk about is Strategic Capital. Why do I like these guys? So based on my research and kind of the conversations I've had with other folks regarding this, Strategic Capital is a little different from the J.G. Wentworth and Peachtree Funding type folks because those types of companies typically use like high pressure sales volume, stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like it's a dog eat dog world out there. You got to make your mint while you can. But I like Strategic Capital because to me, it feels like they prioritize an educated approach when it comes to buying and selling structured settlements and annuities. And so it makes me feel better as a CPA that these folks are interested in making sure you understand what you're doing. They're also not going to buy your annuity or your structured settlement unless they think it's in your best interest, which is required by law. It has to be signed off by a judge typically. Um, Annuities, maybe not so much like injury claims and things like that, but those types of payments have to be released by a judge. And so, for them to take the time to educate you on what you're doing, what a discount rate is, how the process works, maybe only give you the amount of money that you need for like your medical emergency or to get out of debt or to get the down payment on your home or something like that. That's why I like talking about Strategic Capital because they want to help preserve future income streams. Essentially, is kind of the roundabout way of what my research has entailed in dealing with these folks. They also really prioritize like compliance and safety. They do their due diligence to ensure the sale is in your best interest, which means your sale is probably going to be approved in court. And then they're also super transparent. They talk about what their discount rate is, what their fees are, what's rolled into it. So you're not going to find a bunch of administrative costs baked into baked into your discount rate and things like that as you get that last piece of paper slid across the table to you. I like that. If I were advising a client who absolutely had to sell, which that's the first thing is try not to have to need to sell these structured settlements and these annuities. I would start with Strategic Capital, but of course, I would always recommend get as many quotes as you possibly can because at the end of the day, you want the most money for your valuable asset. All right, let's jump into the next one. The next one I want to talk about is Fairfield Funding. So um, they've got a niche as a low cost provider. They're smaller than the industry giants. They don't spend tons and tons of money on TV ads like J.G. Wentworth. It's my money, I need it now. And so they have lower overhead and they're able to have more competitive rates and offers. They stand out to me because they advertise a 100% guaranteed close. They pledge that they'll cover all the closing costs and court fees, even if the judge says no and denies the transfer. And so that removes financial risk from the person selling the annuity. I like that. Because they're smaller, they can also move pretty fast on paperwork, more so than some of the bureaucratic giants like JG or Peachtree. However, keep in mind that the court docket's caseload is what's ultimately going to be the biggest timeline constraint. And so if, the judge can't see you for 90 days, it'll be 90 days before you get your money. And that's all there is to it. Overall, Fairfield is a good, middle of the road, in my opinion. I appreciate the efficiency, and I appreciate their lean operational model, which means you get a better discount rate, which means you get more for your money, which is what I'm always advocating for. The next one I want to talk about is JG Wentworth. So this is the elephant in the room. It's the equivalent of talking about accounting software, not mentioning QuickBooks. This is the structured settlement equivalent of that type of conversation. So JG Wentworth, they've got the best brand recognition. They also have the speed and the marketability. If you contact JG Wentworth, you know that you're going to be handled in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 step process. They're going to get you in there. They're turning over high volumes of transactions. If you've got a standard case and you need to move quick, JG Wentworth is probably going to be the one for you. On reliability, they can fund any funding obligation. I would imagine anything short of a massive Powerball jackpot, JG Wentworth is going to be able to close the deal, get you the funds. That check's going to clear. You don't have to worry about it. As for experience, they've handled billions of transactions, or I should say billions of dollars of transactions, of course. If it had been billions of transactions, probably just about everybody would have interacted with them. So, but my takeaway with JG Wentworth is they've got a pretty big marketing budget, which to me means they're probably not going to have as of an effective discount rate. And so, there's overhead, there's the cost of all these employees. They have to turn and burn these deals. And so you're probably going to need to negotiate a little bit in order to make sure you get what your asset is worth, to get what your annuity is worth. So keep that in mind. If you don't mind playing ball, and I don't mind playing ball, I like to negotiate. I like to talk about how I can get a better deal. JG Wentworth may not be for you if you're a little bit more timid and you don't want to push back on some of these bigger players. Okay, I have another middle of the road one here. This one is great for flexible options, and so I wanted to include it. It's Peachtree Financial Solutions. Peachtree is actually a subsidiary of JG Wentworth, but they operate with a different focus, in my opinion. I say that because they offer a portfolio of solutions. Obviously, they wouldn't be in the video if they couldn't buy the annuities and the structured settlements, but they also do things like debt consolidation. You can see here they can help you buy a house, pay medical bills, start a business even. So they're a little bit more flexible, and that makes them a little bit more unique. And so I like that. I also like that they're kind of a middle of the road option. Even though they're owned by JG Wentworth, they're almost a separate entity is how I would paint that picture. They stand out to me because they buy that wide range of payment streams and those different services. However, because they're also part of the JG Wentworth family, they're going to be just as reliable. So you kind of get the feel and corporate turn and burn of a larger company, but they're still small enough to be able to move things quickly, to be able to offer the solutions that you need. I think they're a good middle ground because if you get a price quote from Strategic Capital, you get a price quote from Peachtree, you get a price quote from JG Wentworth, and some of the other folks that we've talked about today, you can compare them all. And I think you'll find that there'll be different discount rates, which I'm really harping on that because I want to make sure it's evident that I advise to ensure that you get the most that you can. And so by contacting these different companies, you can fight for what's yours essentially and try not to get less money than what you deserve. At the end of the day, that's what we're after, right? And so by having all these different, you've got these small players, these giant players, and someone in between, I think it makes it for a good comparison to see who can offer what. And Peachtree is kind of that middle of the road company, in my opinion. The last one I want to talk about is DRB Capital. And they're a little different from the other folks that we've talked about today because they offer the financial get out of jail free card, if you will. And the reason I say that is they're one of the only companies that I've mentioned today that will give you cash up front before the deal is closed. And so if you're really, really in a pinch, and you're like, man, I just need a couple $1,000s to make my rent, to pay my mortgage so I don't lose my house, you can call them and they will say, okay, if you do the deal with us, we'll give you $3,000 to $4,000, $5,000 up front. Here it is. And so that's a really, really good thing to have. However, to me, it is super important that you realize typically there's going to be interest accrued on that because it's essentially just a loan. They haven't bought your payment yet, so it's just a loan. And then there could be some pretty hefty fees that go along with that for that because of the convenience that they're providing. So they have that option. They give you that pre-settlement cash if you can't wait for the court approval. It's just in advance. They can also do very large policies. They're a well-known company. They're plenty sizable to do most annuity and structured settlement buyouts. But they also market themselves on speed, understanding that most people who need the annuity to be sold are doing it because they have something pressing. They have something important in their lives that they need the money for. And so they prioritize speed. So any one of these five will be able to take care of you. At the end of the day, the bottom line is do your homework. To me, that's going to be contacting all of them, spending a couple hours with each of them. Make it, take a full week to do your investigation and see what you can get from who. However, if you're not interested in that and you want a one-stop shop, to me, I feel like I would lean towards Strategic Capital because they really emphasize being an educated seller. And they want to make sure you understand the ramifications of what you're doing, that you're giving up future income streams for money right now. And you're giving up that safety blanket for money right now. And if they think it's worth their while, or they think this is the amount of money that you need, they'll recommend a partial sale or only buying a portion of that income stream. And to me, that just sits right. It means, they're not out there just to make the most amount of money, because all these other companies, to me, they want to buy as much as they can, because the more they buy now, the more money they make. And that, to me, that at the end of the day is what sets Strategic Capital apart from these other folks. Now, they all have their niches. If you just want a big corporate guy, call J.G. Wentworth. If you need money now, like right now, not the jingle, no pun intended, call DRB Capital for the cash advance. And you can contact a lot of these. Some of these folks do offer cash advances up front. Just be transparent with your situation. So anyway, everyone's got their niche. They all kind of fill a role, figure out what you need, and then give them a call and start talking to some folks who know even more about it than I do. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you can make an informed decision now.